can be an attainable goal for an individual and family afflicted by rare diseases, not only to improve the quality of life, but possibly even find a cure. I rise in support of this bill and yield back.
Gentleman from Michigan.
Mr. Speaker, I would yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Minnesota in support of the legislation, Mr. Paulson.
The gentleman from Minnesota is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I want to applaud, first of all, the chairman and subcommittee chairman for their leadership in bringing this bipartisan package to the floor, and the ranking member. Mr. Speaker, nearly every week I get a chance to tour a medical device company in my district, and almost every week I hear a similar story from these companies that talk about how the FDA has become so burdensome and bureaucratic and inefficient that they move the goalposts in the process of the device approval process. And as a result, some of these companies are closing their doors, some of these companies are investing overseas and moving jobs as opposed to keeping them in the home state of Minnesota or here in the United States. And unfortunately, it seems that Washington tends to thrive in these types of bureaucracies and inefficiencies. And I think the package that is before us today is designed to help correct that. And the FDA review process needs to be rigorous, but it also needs to be relevant. We've heard that message time and time again. We have to find ways to streamline and modernize the FDA so that the United States can remain the leader in global medical innovation. This package absolutely moves us closer to meeting all of those goals. These reforms will make the device approval process much more transparent, much more consistent, much more predictable. And specifically, I'm happy that my provisions to streamline the third-party review process were included as well. I want to thank, for the bipartisan support, thank the chairman, and urge support by my colleagues. Yield back.
Mr. Speaker, may I ask how much time is left on each side?
The gentleman from Michigan has 2 minutes. The gentleman from New Jersey has 2.5 minutes remaining.
Mr. Speaker, I have just myself left, no other speakers, so if the gentleman wants to close, and then I'll close, and then we'll...
The gentleman from New Jersey is recognized for 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I won't use all the time. I just want to stress again that the process in getting this bill passed and moved both here and in the Senate has been just a great model, if you will, for I think what we can do when we want to get together and work together on a bipartisan, bicameral basis. So I can't say enough about everyone who was involved on both sides of the aisle and the staff in making this happen today. I also want to reiterate some of the things that some of my colleagues have said about how important this is, because, you know, it's on a suspension, and some people may say, well, how important is it? It is extremely important, and some of those sentiments have been echoed by those who talk about the drug and medical device industry, which is really so important to this country. We pride ourselves on innovation. Some of you know that many of these companies are in my district, and we pride ourselves on the fact that Thomas Edison had his lab at Menlo Park in my district, and that we're an innovative area in New Jersey and New Jersey as a whole. But that can't happen. Innovation can't continue to happen in this industry unless we continue to have an FDA process that runs smoothly and effectively. The fact of the matter is that this legislation is designed to make sure that that continues to happen, that the money is available so we can have an efficient process that continues to make the United States the innovator in the area of pharmaceuticals and medical devices. So I'm very proud to have been a part of this today. I urge everyone to support the bill, and I thank my colleagues. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Michigan is recognized for 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I just want to say all of the positive comments here, this bill was not a piece of cake. It was a lot of hard work by both sides of the aisle, particularly the staff on both sides of the aisle. And again, I want to cite Clay and Ryan on our staff, but let's face it, all of us particularly involved on the health side of the issues, as we meet with different folks afflicted with different diseases, we want to find a cure. And it would be great to find that cure here in America, because we have outstanding pharmaceutical industries that have the talent and the staff to work with the different departments, whether it be the NIH, the CDC, certainly the FDA. So we really did set out last summer to embark on a good listening session to find out what it is that we needed to do to not only to find the cures and the prescriptions, but the right process for them to be approved so that those companies willing to make that investment would stay here in America and not go overseas. Because we really do want it made in America. We have the best folks here. And that's what this bill does. and the hard work by so many, the hearings that Joe Pitts led with Mr. Pallone, the work, the amendments, the subcommittee, the full committee, all that process to get it done before it really expired later on this year is so important, not only to the workers, but more importantly to the patients. So dealing with the drug shortages and working with Mr. McCall and the different rare diseases, all those different elements, we were able to weave into what I think is a mighty fine, strong bill. And to then, of course, work with our counterparts in the Senate, who we often bash here, but they actually stayed with us. And we were able to work in a very strong bipartisan way to get our two bills refined and done in order to bring up on the House floor this afternoon. And I want to compliment everyone, certainly Mr. Waxman, who's back on the floor, but our leadership, the team that we had on both sides of the aisle, again, our hard-working staff that really worked so hard to get this done that impacts millions of lives. I urge my colleagues to support this bill and yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. All time has expired. The question is, will the House suspend the rules and pass Senate 3187 as amended? Those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. In the opinion of the Chair, two-thirds being in the affirmative, the rules are suspended. The bill is passed, and without objection, the motion to reconsider is laid on the table. Okay. Mr. McKinley, are you? Okay, once. For what purpose does the gentleman from West Virginia rise?
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion at the desk.
The clerk will report the motion.
Motion to instruct conferees on H.R. 4348, offered by Mr. McKinley of West Virginia. Mr. McKinley of West Virginia moves that the managers on the part of the House at the conference on the disagreeing votes of the two houses on the Senate amendment to the bill H.R. 4348 be instructed to insist on the provisions contained in Title V of the House bill relating to coal combustion residuals.
Pursuant to Clause 7 of Rule 22, the gentleman from West Virginia, Mr. McKinley, and the gentleman from California, Mr. Waxman, each will control 30 minutes. The Chair recognizes the gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 7 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Concrete is a fundamental element of roads, bridges, and infrastructure projects. An important element of concrete is coal ash. This is now the 4th time the House has affirmed and reaffirmed its support for the beneficial use of recycling coal ash. Currently, the Conference Committee on H.R. 4348 is deep in productive negotiations, and strong bipartisan compromises have occurred. relative to the coal ash provision. My intent today is to urge the conferees to continue this bipartisan negotiations and retain this important cost-saving provision in the final bill. We're not here to rehash the same ideologically motivated arguments we have heard from the extremists. Simply put, we are here to help put people back to work, to give American businesses certainty, and to protect the health and environment of our families and friends. For those who say coal ash is irrelevant to roads and bridges, they couldn't be further from the truth. Concrete suppliers have been incorporating coal ash into concrete mixtures since the construction of the Hoover Dam over 80 years ago. Without coal ash, the cost of construction projects would increase by $100 billion, according to the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, thereby reducing the amount of monies available for roads and bridges and infrastructure in America. Keep in mind, less construction results in fewer jobs. By retaining this bipartisan section of the highway bill, Congress will be also protecting the 316,000 jobs that are at stake in the recycling of fly ash. Jobs involving concrete block, brick, drywall, ceramic tile, bowling balls, and even in the cosmetics industry. For those who've been asking where the jobs bills are, this is a jobs bill. Among the supporters of this language are the Chamber of Commerce, the National Association of Manufacturers, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, the United Mine Workers, the United Transportation Union, the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, the International Brotherhood of Boilermakers, and the AFL-CIO's Building and Construction Trades. Consider these quotes, Mr. Speaker. Removing coal ash from the supply chain would increase the price of concrete by an average of 10%, according to the National Association of Home Builders. According to the National Association of Manufacturers, coal ash contributes $6 to $11 billion annually to the United States economy through revenues of sale for beneficial use, avoided cost of disposal, and savings from use of sustainable building materials. Mr. Speaker, currently 60 million tons of fly ash is recycled annually. According to its own data, coal ash replaces between 15 and 30% of the Portland cement used in concrete. The EPA has noted that the use of coal ash in concrete has resulted in savings as much as 25 million tons of greenhouse gas emissions annually and as much as 54 million barrels of oil. The EPA has indicated the annual financial benefits of using coal ash as a substitute for Portland cement contributes nearly $5 billion in energy savings, $41 billion in water savings, $240 million in emission reductions, and nearly $18 billion in non-greenhouse gases related pollution. The EPA itself states that coal ash leads to better roads. In two studies, one in '93 and 2000, both under the Clinton administration's EPA, found that coal ash did not warrant the regulations being pushed by the Obama administration. In 2005, the EPA, the Federal Highway Administration, and the Department of Energy collaborated with the private sector to craft guidance on the appropriate uses and benefits of coal ash in highway construction. Mr. Speaker, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself 5 minutes.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Reauthorizing the federal surface transportation programs is important for communities across the country. It will help revitalize our transportation infrastructure and will create jobs. The Transportation Conference Committee must work together to finalize a conference report as soon as possible to get people back to work. The Senate worked on a bipartisan manner, developed a strong bill that will create jobs and help the economy. They focused on the core issues, ignoring the temptation to attach side issues to this important legislation. Unfortunately, the transportation bill is now being jeopardized by extraneous and anti-environmental provisions being pushed by Republicans in the House. Instead of working to come to agreement on important transportation policy provisions, House Republicans are holding the bill hostage for a legislative earmark for the Keystone XL tar sands pipeline, provisions that steamroll environmental review of projects, and the McKinley coal ash bill that eliminates existing authority to protect human health and the environment from the risks posed by unsafe disposal of coal ash. This motion to instruct is the latest effort to push these positions. It would instruct the transportation conferees to insist on the McKinley coal ash bill in the transportation bill. But the McKinley coal ash proposal is extraneous. If we do nothing on the transportation bill to address coal ash disposal, then coal ash will continue to be available for use in concrete, for transportation projects, just as it is today. Current federal regulations do not restrict the use of coal ash in concrete. And counter to what you may hear today, EPA has not proposed to regulate such beneficial reuses. Although some may suggest that recycling of coal ash will decrease because of the stigma, experience has shown that when waste materials are regulated, as EPA has proposed to do for coal ash, the rates of recycling and reuse increases. This has happened with other regulated wastes. It happened with coal ash in Wisconsin, which has a robust regulatory scheme. There's a very simple reason for this. Disposal in unsafe pits is inexpensive but environmentally dangerous. When reasonable environmental safeguards are put in place, the cost of disposal will increase. That makes alternatives like using coal ash in concrete more attractive. The coal ash legislation that this motion seeks to include will not ensure the safe disposal of coal ash. It will not prevent coal ash impoundments from catastrophically failing. It will not protect against significant environmental and economic damage, and it will not prevent contamination of public drinking water systems. The McKinley coal ash bill will not stop another spill like we saw in Kingston, air pollution like we have seen in Gambrills, Maryland, or water pollution like we have seen nationwide. What this coal ash proposal will do is stop the transportation conference from succeeding. This motion to instruct attempts to lock the House conferees into a position that the Senate will only reject, and it will doom the Transportation Conference Committee to failure. We can retreat to intractable positions on extraneous issues, making a transportation bill difficult, if not impossible, to pass, particularly in the time frame that we have set out for us. Or we can work together in the time we have to produce a transportation that will be signed by the President and will keep our economy on the mend. A vote for this motion is a vote against completing the Transportation Conference. I urge all members to say yes to transportation and vote no on this position. And on this motion, I reserve the balance of my time.
Gentleman reserves. The gentleman from West Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my colleague from Illinois, Mr. Shimkus.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 3 minutes. Without objection, so ordered.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's great to be down here, and this is why this provision of this bill is really pertinent to the highway bill. Here it is: Flexcrete, fly ash, lighter, more durable. I got two documents I brought down to the floor. The second one reads in the acknowledgments, this document was prepared by the U.S. EPA in cooperation with the following agencies and associations: Department of Energy, Federal Highway Administration, American Coal Ash Association, and the Utility Solid Waste Activities Group. Well, what's interesting about these two books, one published in June 2003, the other one published in 2005, is they go through all the great uses of fly ash in construction. And I'd like to read just a few of those. Here's one. Fly ash improves workability for pavement of concrete. Remember, DOT book, EPA approved, DOE approved. The next one has fly ash concrete is used in severe exposure applications such as decks and piers of Tampa Bay's Sunshine Skyway Bridge. Nice photo here, beautiful bridge. So this is not new. This is reaffirming what the construction industry has been doing for decades. And actually, in this other pamphlet, I'll talk about even greater use. Here's another one, fly ash concrete finishing. Again, this is a Federal Highway Administration book, Department of Energy book, sponsored by the U.S. EPA, all saying good things about fly ash in road construction. Full depth reclamation of a bituminous road. Another one, flowable fill used in utility trench applications, all dealing with fly ash. Fly ash in structural fills and embankments. Nice photo of them using that in the construction sector. Also, the soil stabilization to improve soil strength, all using fly applications. We have a highway bill. And that's why this provision is very, very important, because if the EPA has its way and they label fly ash as toxic, guess what? No more flex concrete. No more building of buildings that have fly ash applications. This is one of my favorite ones. Use of ash in construction through the ages. The ancient time, the Romans added volcanic ash to concrete to strengthen structures such as the Roman Pantheon and the Colosseum, both of which still stand today. The first major use of coal fly ash in concrete in the United States occurred in 1942 to repair a tunnel spillway at the Hoover Dam. One of the most impressive concrete structures in the country is Hungry Horse Dam near Glacier National Park in Montana. Was constructed from 1948 to 1952 with concrete containing, you guessed it, fly ash. We're in Washington, D.C. What are the great things we see here? In Washington, I ask for additional 30 seconds.
Additional.
Gentleman is recognized for an additional 30
seconds. In Washington, D.C., both the metropolitan area subway system, named as Metro, and the new Ronald Reagan Building and International Trade Center were built by, you guessed it, fly ash and concrete. Other significant structures utilizing coal fly ash as concrete including the Big Dig in Boston and decks and piers of the Tampa Bay's Sunshine Skyway Bridge. That's why this is applicable to the highway bill. I commend my colleague, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I'd like to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Illinois, the ranking member of the Energy Subcommittee, Mr. Rush.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 5 minutes.
I want to thank the ranking member on the Energy and Commerce Committee and let him know how much I appreciate not only his leadership on other issues, but particularly his leadership on this issue here. Mr. Speaker, I stand here astounded, amazed, and bemused at the remarks of the past speaker. You know, he wants the American people to be convinced that fly ash is as healthy to them as it can be, and that they should, in fact, maybe go out and go to their local drugstores and ask for a bottle of fly ash so they can sprinkle it over their dinner meal as they would maybe salad dressing. I don't think that the American people would be pleased with that. Mr. Speaker, I stand in strong opposition to this motion to instruct. At a time when we are facing historic levels of joblessness in communities around the country, in the African American communities and other minority communities. Republicans are playing chicken with the transportation bill, which is intended to provide American jobs and repair our aging economy. It's not to further the contamination of the water supplies, the air supplies in our most vulnerable communities. So why don't we stop the charade? Why don't we stop the asthmatic assault on the most vulnerable segments, the most vulnerable communities in our nation? This motion to instruct contains a deadly and dangerous provision that will only allow more poisoning, more disease, and more death from one of our nation's biggest waste products, the deadly, cancerous coal ash that's under discussion today. Coal ash, I want to remind you, is a waste left over after thousands of tons of coal are burned at coal-fired power plants and is laden from top to bottom with toxins such as mercury, arsenic, cadmium, chromium, and lead. These are the pollutants that causes cancer, that causes organ disease, breathing problems, neurological damage, developmental problems, and even the final problem, which is death. Mr. Speaker, Title V of the H.R. 4348 gives companies an unprecedented ability to pollute the resource conservation and Recovery Act. The unprecedented ability to pollute under the Resources Conservation and Recovery Act, even though the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, found some coal ash ponds that they pose a 1 in 50 risk of cancer related to residents drinking arsenic contaminated water, a risk that is 2,000 times the EPA's regulatory goal. Dangerous coal ash disposal affects thousands of U.S. communities, but research informs us that income and race remain strong predictors of the amount of pollutions that these Americans face. The majority of coal ash is disposed in grossly inadequate dump sites, which are primarily located in low-income communities, disproportionately impacting those who are least equipped to respond to water contamination and the onslaught of toxic dust in the air. Mr. Speaker, low-income citizens are more likely to rely on groundwater supplies and less likely to have access to medical insurance and health care. Could I have one more minute?
Yield the gentleman an additional minute.
The gentleman is recognized for 1 more minute.
Mr. Speaker, Title V of H.R. 4348 fails to protect communities and their drinking water from toxic coal ash or from another massive spill like the disaster that occurred in Kingston, Tennessee in 2008. Mr. Speaker, let me conclude by saying that my state alone produces 4.4 million tons of coal ash annually, and at least 19 coal ash dump sites have contaminated local water supplies. Additionally, each and every day, a steam-fired steamship, the SS Badger, dumps 4 tons of coal ash into Lake Michigan, my beloved city of Chicago's primary water supply system. I urge all of my colleagues to vote against this motion motion to instruct, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from West Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Pennsylvania, Mr. Holden.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized
I thank the
for 2
gentleman
minutes.
for yielding. Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of the gentleman from West Virginia, the motion to instruct conferees to resolve the coal ash provision in the highway bill. There are more cogeneration plants in my congressional district than any congressional district in the country. For more than 100 years, coal refuge piles created eyesores throughout northeastern Pennsylvania. These coal banks are now baseball fields and shopping centers. Coal ash is not hazardous. EPA determined that fact in regulatory determinations in 1993 and in 2000. The fact that EPA continues to leave a hazardous waste designation for coal ash on the table, even though these 3 decades of science and facts point the other way, is directly contributing to the loss of current and future recycling. This designation would harm companies in the still emerging coal combustion byproduct markets that make everyday products like concrete, shingles, and wallboard. It will also hinder state departments of transportation that use CCB in job-creating highway and infrastructure projects, overwhelm state budgets and employee resources by more than doubling the volume of waste subject to hazardous waste controls, and translates into increased energy rates for millions of American consumers. As a member of the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, I see no better way to create jobs than to pass the highway bill. During the last highway bill, Pennsylvania received over $10 billion, which created over 400,000 jobs. The coal ash provision in the highway bill only strengthens job creation. Simply put, highway spending strengthens the fabric of our nation's infrastructure while creating jobs for millions of Americans. I urge passage of the gentleman's motion to instruct, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, at this time I yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Virginia, Mr. Moran.
Gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the very distinguished gentleman, ranking member on Energy and Commerce, and I rise in opposition to this motion to instruct conferees to include the Coal Residuals and Reuse Management Act into any final conference agreement on the Surface Transportation Authorization Bill. The bill my colleague seeks to include in the Surface Transportation Bill is bad policy. It has nothing to do with transportation, and it would place communities living downstream from coal ash ponds in real danger. When properly recycled, coal ash and other residuals from burning coal do have economic value. That's not the issue here. But managed improperly, they can be extremely hazardous. Coal ash shouldn't be dumped in unregulated ponds to contaminate groundwater and spill into nearby streams and rivers. In 2008, as Mr. Rush pointed to, the Kingston fossil plant in Tennessee failed to properly maintain its coal ash impoundment pond. The pond collapsed. It dumped 1.1 billion gallons of coal ash slurry into the Clinch River. It inundated several houses with up to 6 feet of ash and mud. And then when they independently tested the Clinch River after the Tennessee Valley Authority impoundment collapse, it showed high levels of arsenic, copper, barium, cadmium, chromium, lead, mercury, nickel, and thallium, all related to that spill. The spill contaminated the water, it killed the fish, and it destroyed property. The cleanup price tag is still being assessed, but it's estimated to cost between $700 and $1 billion. The motion my colleague from West Virginia is proposing would prevent EPA from setting standards for this type of coal ash dump, allowing these problems to continue unchecked. We need to preserve the Environmental Protection Agency's authority to advance regulations that discourage improper disposal of coal ash and to encourage recycling. Every year, coal-fired power plants and industrial boilers in the United States generate about 67 million tons of coal ash and slag and about 19 million tons of coal sludge. While fly ash, bottom ash, flue gas desulfurization mineral, and boiler slag all have a number of beneficial reuses in concrete, roads, wallboard, and roofing, they also contain heavy metals, including lead, arsenic, cadmium, and mercury, as well as radioactive elements. These hazardous components dictate that we must be careful in the handling, reuse, and disposal of the material. Contrary to much of the publicity surrounding the coal ash issue, EPA is not trying to ban the beneficial reuse of coal ash. In fact, EPA proposed two separate possible regulatory regimes to encourage recycling and reduce improper coal ash disposal. EPA wants to ensure that coal ash reuse is preserved while guaranteeing that any disposal is done safely and effectively. EPA's proposed rules received extensive public involvement, including thousands of public comments and 8 public hearings around the country. The Coal Residuals and Reuse Management Act is designed to deprive EPA of the ability to use the best available science in its decisions, and it would negate those thousands of public comments that were received after the rules proposal. It would also give a free pass to power companies to pollute at taxpayer expense. Coal ash is a national, interstate issue and should be subject to federal regulation. As Congress stated when passing the Resource Conservation Recovery Act, the problems of waste disposal have become a matter national in scope and in concern and necessitate federal action. Disposal of solid waste and hazardous waste in or on the land without careful planning and management will present a danger to human health and the environment. That was true in 1976. And 30 years later, it's still true. In the years since, we have found that proper regulation of waste disposal encourages rather than discourages recycling. Implementing environmental and safety controls makes recycling far more attractive and far more likely to occur. 30 years of data on solid and hazardous waste disposal and recycling have borne this out. Let's not revisit the Wild West past of hazardous waste disposal. We need to stand up for the same principles that Congress stated in the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act over 30 years ago. And so that's why I strongly urge my colleagues to oppose the McKinley motion. Prevent more Kingston ash impoundment disasters. They will be replicated, and it will be our fault. We need to allow EPA to regulate responsibly and to allow the beneficial use of coal ash. With that, I yield back my time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman's time has expired, and the gentleman from West Virginia is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, just before I yield 2 minutes or 3 minutes, 2 minutes to my colleague from West Virginia, I just might suggest, with all due respect, I think those that are opposing this amendment, Mr. Speaker, I would encourage them to read the bill. Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my friend and colleague from the wild, wonderful West Virginia.
Gentlelady from West Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes. 2 minutes.
2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my colleague, Mr. McKinley from West Virginia, for his solid work on this issue. And I want to say to my colleague from California who said that this issue is going to hold the Transportation Conference bill hostage, it's absolutely not a fair statement. I'm on the Transportation Conference Committee. We're working day and night in a bicameral, bipartisan way to reach a compromise on a jobs bill. And this coal ash provision is very important. Many Americans are unfamiliar with this, but 40% is used as a raw material to build our highways and our bridges. I was just visiting the Sutton Dam in Braxton County in West Virginia. My colleague talks about the Hoover Dam. We celebrated its 50-year birthday of its construction It's built with coal ash, and it's just as effective today as it was 50 years ago. It is an essential and safe material to be used in our infrastructure. According to the American Road and Transportation Builders Association, if we don't use coal ash in bridge and road construction, the cost would increase over $100 billion over 20 years. We simply can't afford this. Let's be smart about this. We can find the way, and we've known the way, as the Sutton Dam and the Hoover Dam have shown us. I think we can find a way to safely reduce the cost of constructing our roads and bridges and using coal ash. We have an unemployment of over 8% for 30 consecutive months. We need a transportation bill. We need a smart transportation bill that's going to put America back to work and rebuild our infrastructure. Mr. McKinley's legislation and this motion takes the right approach by giving the states the authority to deal with this. I hope my fellow conferees will work to ensure that this important provision remains in the bill, that we pass the gentleman's motion to instruct. This will not be an obstruction to us passing the transportation bill, and I look forward to passing that bill on the floor in a bipartisan way, and I yield back.
The gentlelady yields back. The gentleman from California is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased at this time to yield 5 minutes to the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Markey.
The gentleman from Massachusetts is recognized for 5 minutes.
I thank the gentleman. Today marks the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Instead of spending the daylight hours passing a clean transportation bill that will help shore up real jobs for Americans, the Congress will be spending the day repealing public health protections and giving away nearly all of our public lands to oil and gas companies in the culmination of the Republican majority's oil above all agenda. It is really a midsummer's nightmare for the American people. But before we get to voting on the Republican oil package, we get to debate whether another Republican bill, whose sole premise is to prevent EPA from following the scientific evidence, should be included in the transportation bill. This bill says that no matter what EPA learns about the sludge that comes out of coal-fired powered plants, no matter how high the concentrations of poisonous arsenic, mercury, or chromium, no matter what EPA learns about how these materials find their way into our drinking water, EPA is forbidden to classify or regulate it as hazardous waste. EPA is forbidden to require that this toxic material be disposed of carefully. This bill turns a blind eye to evidence of known hazards and takes us back to the dark ages, to a time before science was valued and before advanced knowledge transformed society. It takes us back to an era when mercury and arsenic, major components of coal ash, were used to cure toothaches and clear up your complexion. It takes us back to an era where children were sent deep into the bowels of the earth to rip coal from the mines and die early deaths. Apparently, House Republicans not only wish to embrace the principal energy source of the 19th century, they also wish to return us to the 19th century principles about public health and the environment regarding arsenic and mercury and their danger to the citizens of our country. Now, there are good uses for coal ash, beneficial uses. It can be used to construct highways and shingles. That's good. It can be mixed into concrete and grout. That's good. But what we don't want is for the industry to be able to use it to construct a golf course like what they did in Battlefield, Virginia, because it can directly contaminate the groundwater. It can pollute and cause injury and cancers in the neighbors of that golf course. We also don't want it to be disposed of in pits that aren't sealed to handle this special waste, like what happened in Tennessee when a TVA disposal pit collapsed, engulfing an entire small town in toxic sludge. We should have regulations to protect against that ever happening in our country again. This is exactly what this bill, the Republican bill, will do. It will blast us back into the past and allow coal ash to be disposed of without proper construction or monitoring. At the end of this month, transit and highway funding will expire. Hundreds of thousands of jobs are at stake, and our transportation infrastructure will be in peril. Even Senate Republicans have recognized the dangers inherent in allowing this to occur and have joined with Senate Democrats to craft a bipartisan bill so we can put people back to work using coal ash in the highways of our country. But in spite of this, the House Republicans are insisting that unrelated and unnecessary, toxic provisions, dangerous to the health and well-being of Americans, be attached to this bill in order to protect big oil and big coal. Instead of allowing the coal industry and Republicans to transport our country's environmental and public health standards back to the era of Charles Dickens, we should be holding them to higher expectations for the 21st century, for the public health and well-being of our people. I urge a no vote on this preposterous Republican initiative.
The gentleman from West Virginia is recognized.
Speaker, I yield 3 minutes to my colleague, Mr. Renacci from the state of Ohio.
The gentleman from Ohio is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise today in strong support of this motion to instruct the Surface Transportation Bill conferees. The EPA's proposed rule to classify coal ash as a hazardous material is yet another example of this administration's continual attack on coal and the affordable domestic energy it generates. The production and use of coal ash has grown into a multi-billion-dollar industry supporting thousands of jobs in my home state of Ohio. Coal ash is used in more than 75% of the concrete primarily because of its cost effectiveness. Eliminating it would force concrete producers to use expensive alternatives, driving up the cost of building roads and bridges in America by more than $5 billion a year. That means construction costs won't go as far at a time when our infrastructure is in dire need of repair. In addition, classifying coal ash as a hazardous material will prove extremely costly for coal-fired power plants. Some energy companies may analyze the costs and find it simply too expensive to continue operating. Others may attempt to pass the new costs on to consumers in a form of higher utility costs. Either way, the outcome would be devastating for a state like Ohio that derives 80% of its electric power from coal. With our economy still struggling, that is the last thing Ohio businesses, construction companies, and families need right now. Despite decades of research and studies concluding there is no reason to consider coal ash hazardous, many of which the EPA itself carried out, the agency now appears willing to jeopardize thousands of jobs with this inaccurate ruling. It is critical that efforts are taken to prevent the implementation of this regulation. Instead, allow each state to set up their own coal ash recycling programs following existing EPA health and environmental regulations. This approach will protect jobs in our economy in my home state and across America. I applaud Representative McKinley for his continued leadership on this issue, and I urge the conferees to keep the bipartisan House language in the final version of the Surface Transportation Bill. I yield back my time.
Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from California.
Mr. Speaker, I now have the pleasure to yield 1 minute to the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Quigley.
Gentleman from Illinois is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, today the House will vote on yet another environmental ruinous bill. This motion would instruct surface transportation conferees to retain the language of H.R. 2273, which prohibits the EPA from regulating coal ash. Coal ash is the toxic combination of mercury, boron, aluminum, thallium, sodium, and arsenic that is produced by burning coal. Shockingly, people living near unlined coal ash ponds have a risk of cancer that is 2,000 times greater than the EPA's acceptable level. Yet this motion would disallow the EPA from doing its job. Allowing the EPA to enforce safeguards against coal ash pollution would help to avoid disasters like the 2008 spill in Tennessee, where a dam holding more than 1 billion gallons of toxic coal ash failed. That spill destroyed 300 acres and dozens of homes, devastated wildlife, poisoned 2 rivers, and apparently taught us nothing. I urge my colleagues to oppose this latest attempt to bar the EPA from saving lives and preserving the environment, and I yield back.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 3 minutes of my remaining time to Mr. Doyle, Congressman Doyle from Pennsylvania.
Gentleman from Pennsylvania is recognized for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the gentleman's motion to instruct. Coal ash is a serious issue for this country, and especially for Pennsylvania. Nearly all of my constituents get their power from coal, and with that power generation comes its byproduct, coal ash. It's an unavoidable part of our power generation in southwestern Pennsylvania. And though the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania has some of the toughest coal ash disposal standards in the country, I've been convinced that coal ash needs to be federally regulated under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act. However, this motion to instruct does not fully encompass my position on the issue. Though this motion to instruct calls on conferees to insist upon House language on coal ash, that's not the whole story. In fact, I support the coal ash language in the bipartisan group that senators are working on. I've seen much of the work they've been doing, and I can tell you I believe it to be an improvement on what we're doing here in the House. The question is, will the conferees agree to a bill at all, and will it include coal ash? My vote in favor of this motion is meant to urge my colleagues to finish the process so we can resolve the coal ash issue in a way that's good for the environment, our constituents, and the purposes of recycling these materials. I want to make it clear I do not believe that any coal ash or Keystone provisions should be used to hold up the Transportation Bill Conference. Above all else, it's essential that this Congress does its job and completes the Highway Bill Conference before the current program expires on June 30th. I continue to support the federal regulation of coal ash as a non-hazardous waste. I encourage my colleagues to work quickly towards a bipartisan, bicameral resolution on this issue, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from California. Sorry, gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I want to yield at this time 3 minutes to the gentleman from Rhode Island, Mr. Langevin.
Does the gentleman from West Virginia seek to yield time? From where? Gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized. The gentleman from Rhode Island is recognized for 3 minutes. Without objection.
I thank the gentleman for yielding. Mr. Speaker, yet another summer building season is well underway without a long-term transportation bill. And we are, quite frankly, down to the wire on the current funding authorization, which expires next Sunday. And yet, here we are debating the addition of even more non-transportation-related measures. Now, Congressman McKinley's motion to instruct on coal ash is yet another example of delay. The transportation conferees ought to be urgently completing their work on a long-term authorization not saddled with extraneous requirements which pose a threat to public health. With thousands of jobs on hold until Congress acts, this delay is unconscionable. Now, our State Departments of Transportation gave us early warning that if the Congress does not act and did not act on a long-term transportation bill by March 31st, the summer building season would be compromised. Now, the Senate recognized this concern and sent to the House bipartisan legislation known as MAP 21, a bill which passed the Senate with a strong bipartisan support of 74 senators. And yet, as we saw March 31st deadline come and go, House leadership refused to take up the bipartisan Senate bill, knowing full well that carrying extension into the summer building season would cost jobs. And it has. Now, nowhere is our nation's fragile recovery more apparent than in my home state of Rhode Island, which currently has an unemployment rate of 11%. Now, according to RIDOT, millions of dollars in projects have already been delayed, including a $6.4 million project to carry I-95 over 10 Rod Road in Exeter, Rhode Island, a $1.5 million project to provide traffic improvements on I-295 ramps along borders of Cranston and Johnston, a $3.5 million project to resurface State Street to Broad Street and Main Street to Route 1A in Westerly, Rhode Island. These projects not only improve the infrastructure upon which our businesses and residents rely, they mean real jobs, desperately needed jobs for Rhode Islanders. Now, MAP 21 will help rebuild America's economy on a stronger, more sustainable foundation. It will provide financing for critical highway and transit projects and support almost 2 million jobs, 9,000 of them in my home state of Rhode Island. Now, a 90-day extension, Mr. Speaker, is almost up. It was reluctantly passed back in March with the promise of a long-term measure to follow, a bill which is yet to materialize. Now, we, Mr. Speaker, must let the conferees finish their work, let the EPA continue to do its job protecting the public from the risks of coal ash, which include cancer, neurological disorders, birth defects, and asthma. I urge my colleagues to vote against this industry-driven motion and to vote for moving forward on the path to rebuild our roads, our communities, and our economy by bringing the American people a long-term transportation bill. With that, I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman from West Virginia.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to my colleague from Texas, Mr. Olson.
Gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise in support of my good friend, Mr. McKinley, in his efforts to include the Coal Residuals Reuse and Management Act in the final Transportation Authorization Bill. EPA's goal of issuing new federal rules to regulate coal combustion residuals will have far-reaching and negative impacts on our economy. These EPA rules would severely hamper American energy production, thereby risking our nation's ability to meet the electricity generation we need to grow our economy and get our country back on track working again. President Obama wants to eliminate coal as a source of energy for America. And this should come as no surprise to those who have listened to President Obama's comments when he was a candidate for office. He spoke from his heart in San Francisco in 2008. And here's a summary of what he said. And this is a quote. Let me sort of describe my overall policy. What I've said is that we would put a cap-and-trade system in place that is as aggressive, if not more aggressive, than anybody else is out there. He later said, so if somebody wants to build a coal-powered plant, they can. It's just that it will bankrupt them because they're going to be charged a huge sum for all the greenhouse gas that's being emitted. We need common sense at EPA and a president who understands that an all-the-above strategy includes American coal. And that is why I'm supporting Mr. McKinley's Coal Residuals Reuse and Management Act in the final Transportation Authorization Bill. I urge my colleagues to vote for Mr. McKinley's motion to instruct conferees. I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Thanks. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
Could we reserve at this point in time, Mr. Chairman?
Gentleman reserves? Gentleman reserves. Gentleman from West Virginia. What's he doing?
Mr. Speaker, I yield the next 2 minutes of my time to my colleague from West Virginia, Mr. Rahal.
Gentleman from West Virginia is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the gentleman from West Virginia for yielding, my good friend, and I commend him for his dogged determination on this issue, his patience and persistence, and I certainly rise in support of this motion to instruct. This gentleman from West Virginia was, after all, the Democratic floor manager of the House bill, which got us into conference with the Senate, who accepted the amendment offered by Mr. McKinley, which passed by voice vote on April 18th. This amendment, known as the coal ash provision, is an important provision, and I, like many others, do not want to see it derail the entire transportation bill in its entirety, but I think if this body were to follow the instructions of the House both in this motion and in the previous motion adopted by Mr. Waltz of Minnesota, which instructed conferees to report back by June 22nd, then I believe we would have a transportation bill that this nation would benefit from and our American workers would benefit. Since 1980, the EPA has struggled to figure out whether coal ash should be regulated under the Resource Conservation and Recovery Act, and if so, in what fashion. As of this date, 32 years later, no EPA regulation is in place. The agency had its shot, and now it's time to move on. The provision by the House is aimed at the states bolstering their programs governing the regulation of coal ash and includes enforcement actions if they fail to do so. Given the nexus between the use of coal ash and the manufacturing of cement and that product's use in our transportation system, it is an appropriate matter to be considered within the scope of the conference of the transportation bill. And contrary to some remarks we've heard on the floor today, these motions to instruct do not delay the work of conferees. Being a conferee myself, I know that the conference continues to meet with proposals going back and forth. We're currently playing ping pong on a lot of these proposals, but that's good. It means that we're talking, and it means the process is going forward, and I'm just very optimistic and hopeful that we can reach an agreement sooner rather than later so that America's economy can continue to recover and American workers can go back to work with certainty. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman's time has expired. Gentleman from Massachusetts.
May I inquire of the Chair how much time is remaining on both sides?
Gentleman from Massachusetts has 5 1/2 minutes remaining.